Okay, we're on. It's me, uh, Jason Sylvan again, still at Texas A&M University, if you're watching this video, probably right after the one you just saw. And we've moved from the room that I was in before was where we run DNA gels to see if we're doing lab work correctly, basically. We moved from there into my microscope room. So this is my microscope, and behind me you see one of my favorite videos of a bunch of bacteria eating oil. So in that particular video, all the little blue dots are single bacteria cells, and the kind of these gold dots here are little droplets of oil. And so one of the things I study is how bacteria eat oil after oil spills and kind of clean that up naturally.
Okay, so let's go to some questions. Mia wanted to know what is your favorite cell, and Miguel wanted to know what is your favorite unicellular organism.
Those are really difficult questions. However, I've thought about this a little bit. And that for favorite cell, they're not going to be microbial cells, because that's difficult. But I was thinking, like, what's my favorite cell? And I really like art and I really like music, so it'd probably be like my eye cells and my ear cells. You can take the touch and taste, you can take those senses. I don't care about that. But I think those would be my favorite cells. My favorite unicellular organism, there's one that I've been obsessing about. I haven't grown it yet, but I've seen the same species in multiple hydrothermal vent systems that I study, and they live in kind of cold areas where there's a lot of sulfur, and I was able to go out and get single cells of them to get their genomes, and that's one of the projects I'm studying right now, and they don't have a name yet. But I'm trying to figure out what it is that they do, and if I could find out what they do from their genome, then I could grow them and hopefully grow them and name them sometime down the road.
Abigail wants to know, what did you do in high school or middle school to get where you are now?
That's a really good question. Here's why. Because not everybody has a straight path. And so, for most of my life, I've been interested in science. And so in high school, I took classes. Because I was interested in science, I took science all 4 years. Not everybody does that, but I did that. But I also really liked music. And so I took music all through high school. And in college, I was a music minor. And I majored in biology, and I also had a minor in environmental science. So I've kind of always had those two things in my life. And now I'm paid to do science, but I still play music a lot on the side.
Do you want to tell them a little bit about your band?
Yeah, sure. So all through grad school, I was in a few bands. So I like heavy metal and hardcore. And I played in bands, and we toured kind of up and down the East Coast. So I was in grad school in New Jersey. So we played in kind of New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey area a lot, but kind of went up and down the East Coast once. And I would say without being in a band, I think that I might have gone crazy. So for me, that was my real outlet, and I think it's important. It doesn't have to be music, but it's important for people to have something that they love that is outside of their job, that gives them kind of a release from what they're doing, I think.
What instrument did you play?
I play guitar. Yeah.
Okay, back to microbiology. Heidi wanted to know, when did you become interested in microbiology? And Becky wanted to know, how did you become interested in microbiology?
I became interested in microbiology really when I started grad school. So I think when I was in college, I really thought I wanted to work with animals, and part of that was I just wasn't exposed to very much microbiology. I thought, incorrectly, that microbiology was for people that study like medicine and doctors, and that's not true. There's a lot of microbes control the whole environment. And so it wasn't until when I started grad school, and if you go to grad school in oceanography, microbes are so important that that's a large component of the kind of syllabus, is learning about microbes in the ocean. And that's when I realized. So it wasn't until I was like 22 or 23 that I really started to become interested in microbes and microbiology, microbes in the environment, and that's what I do now. So you can find these things out later in life that you really love and pursue them.
Aaliyah wants to know why the tattoos, and do they mean something?
I would say, why not the tattoos? They do mean something. I've always been interested in that kind of. I shouldn't say always. Since I was like probably like 14 or 15, I was like really interested in like tattoos and piercings, and so I have some tattoos. Um, and I do, for me, I get them when they do mean something. So I have one on my arm, and it's my guitar, my amplifier, and they're on fire because they should be. And it says "Rock On," and that's kind of my approach to life. Right, don't let things bother you too much, and just keep on carrying on. And I have some waves because I love the ocean. And on my other arm, I have some deep sea fish because I love deep sea fish. And I have a tattoo on my belly that says herbivore because I'm a vegetarian.
Christopher wants to know, why did you study science and do you like your job?
I I've just always been interested in science and how the world works, and it doesn't have to be that way. But for me personally, it's kind of since I was 5, like I've always wanted to be a scientist, and I do like my job. I think that I get to travel to really cool places and answer questions that are really interesting to me. And I think that there's a lot of aspects of the job that are really exciting. And I also really like teaching. I like working with students, and so I get to kind of do all of that. Yeah, I definitely like my job.
Genevieve wants to know, what do the microorganisms eat and how do they get their food?
So it depends on the microorganism, and it goes back to this idea of if they're heterotrophs or autotrophs, right? And a lot of if an organism is a heterotroph, just like with people, where we have to go out and basically get our food and eat it, get our carbon basically and eat it. A lot of microbes also are heterotrophs, and they have different styles of carbon that they like to eat. They might like to eat proteins, or they might like to eat lipids, or different parts of carbon or oil. Um, and then there's things like autotrophs in the environments that I study, which tend to be like hydrothermal vents and deep subsea floor. There's no light, so we don't have phytoplankton. But they might use chemical reactions like using sulfur as an energy source to make their own food, and then using carbon from carbon dioxide to make sugar. And that's how they do it in the environments I study.
So how do they eat it since they don't have like mouths to chew and stuff?
They have chemical reactions in the cell where they literally take carbon dioxide, which has a carbon in it, right? One carbon, and they take that and they turn it into sugar. And so if you're an autotroph, everybody needs carbon to survive. If you're a heterotroph, you can't make your own, so you have to ingest it. And so the heterotrophs, the single cellular heterotrophs, if they are things like amoeba and protists and like some of the eukaryotes, that their cells are physically a little bit bigger usually, they might actually engulf it. And there's ways that they could do that where they don't have organs necessarily or hands or feet, but they could kind of use the shape of their body to ingest particles. For really tiny things like bacteria, usually they will use enzymes to break down particles, and then they just take in the chemicals. They're not taking in big pieces of anything. They're taking in like a chain of carbon, and that's how they. So they don't have mouths.
So what were some of your interests in 7th grade?
In 7th grade, I played trumpet all through college actually. And so I was really into that. At that point, I knew I wanted to be a marine biologist. And I really liked fish and sharks. Really liked sharks. And I also liked fighter jets. Even though I have horrible vision and that clearly was not something that was going to be in my future, I was pretty into like fast planes and cars at the time.
Ricky says that there's frozen water molecules that have been found beneath the moon's surface. Do you think that microbes live there?
That's a really good question. It's really smart, and that falls into the part of my work that's called astrobiology. And the question is basically, if there's water there, might there be microbes? And in some ways, the answer is that there could be. Water is one of the minimal requirements for life somewhere, as we know it. It could be life that looks totally different from what we know. But there's a lot of other things that an organism would need too, like probably an atmosphere and some other things. So on the moon, I would guess there probably hasn't been stuff that has been alive. Although places like Mars, which we think may have had an atmosphere, there's definitely water, and some of the other bodies in our solar system are of high interest for people trying to see if there are signs of life either in the past or currently.
And Jose Luis wants to know, how did you feel when you found the new organism?
I was really excited. Yeah, I mean, I maybe you would think that would be the case, but it's really cool, kind of finding something that nobody else has seen before, and then getting to, especially when you've found a microbe, right, or a new species that's actually alive, and you can work with it and see how it lives. That's really fun because you don't know what you're going to find, and that's at its heart, that's what drives all of scientists. Just you don't know what you're going to find, and trying to understand how the world works. Press stop.
Okay.